Not entirely sure what happened this last month, but I read a record number of books, and I'm not necessarily bragging, although it is just a little bit. I read, I think, 8 this month. I am not a fast reader, but I guess I had the time and I had the inspiration. And so without further ado, here's my May wrap up. First of all, it's a nice, pleasant day outside here in Wisconsin, low 60s. So I've got the windows open, so you're probably going to hear some birds chirping in the background, but isn't that pleasant? What's not pleasant is the first book that I've read this month. It was I Am Legend by Richard Matheson. So I did a review of this book, and you can see in the annotations and watch that if you haven't yet. But I needed something bleak to read. In fact, I read a few bleak, dark stories this last month because if you're watching this at a later time, you might not remember or know that we have been in a very dark, depressing season, really globally, but especially here in the United States, where I live, with just this pandemic, this health emergency with COVID-19. And then there's even been just some other stuff within the last few weeks that is just ravaging our nation. And so I sometimes when things go dark, I like to read darker so that I realize that where we live is bad, but it's not as bad as it could be. This is not the Will Smith movie. This is the book that the movie is based off of. First published in 1954, it is a story about the last living human man on Earth, and all of his friends and neighbors and family have been infected by this disease, virus. We don't exactly know what it is. It's part of the narrative there that has turned everybody into walking zombie vampires. It's a very quick read that doesn't do anything too entirely new when it comes to this kind of sci-fi vampire zombie type thing for about 75% of the book, and then it does. It does do some new things near the end that really just twists and turns it and makes it a very delightful, dark, depressing, but very good read. And then I read Chosen Ones by Veronica Roth. It just came out 2 months ago, I believe, and this is the author, of course, of the Divergent series. And I didn't love Divergent, but I understand why people liked it, and I thought Veronica Roth was a good writer, so I thought that I would give this one a chance because the premise sounded very, very cool. The story takes place 10 years after where most stories end. So it's 10 years after the defeat of the Dark One, or the Dark Lord, or whoever that evil, vile villain was, and you see the aftermath. A decade later, you're dealing with these heroes that are having the emotional trauma, the PTSD from the things that they saw, the things that they had to do to rescue humanity. That's the premise, that's the setup in part 1, and I really enjoyed that. Although I think I read a lot of people actually felt that to be the slow, unimportant, uninteresting part. That was the part that I liked the most. But then we get into part 2 and everything completely changes. I can't talk about it much without giving spoilers. All of my reviews here on this channel are spoiler free for the most part. But I did a review on this book as well, and you can see in the annotations that I didn't love this book. I didn't. On Goodreads, I think I gave it 2 or 3 stars. It's definitely for an audience. Once again, it's good writing and it makes for some okay reading. I think that audience is just not me. I wasn't connected to the characters. The story went places that I didn't care. And then any twists or turns, I was like, okay, this is going to happen. And it did. And so although the premise was really cool and the setup was really cool, and there's a slightly okay, pretty cool magic system within Chosen Ones, it wasn't a book that I care to read the sequel. And it's just definitely the first in a series because it really sets it up for the rest. I don't have any plans to read any further in the series. The next book I read was The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. Have you heard of it before? It is the 1900 book written by L. Frank Baum, and I also did a review for this one. You'll want to watch it because I actually had my first guest on the show. My wife joined me to talk about The Wonderful Wizard of Oz because it is her favorite story of all time. She loved the story as a kid, still loves the story today. We're collecting all 14 of the books in the series. Did you even know that there were that many? And we're systematically going through and reading each and every one. Of course, it was made even more popular by the stage productions, and in the movie that was in like 1939, 36, 35, I don't remember. But this is the first book in the series and the one the movie is based off of. There are a lot of differences and a lot of changes from the book to the movie. Great changes, good changes, but it makes the book an interesting read because you know overall what's happening, but you don't know a lot of the intricacies. And there's some other characters and places that your crew, Dorothy and her friends, go to that you don't even get at all in The Wizard of Oz, the movie. So it was very fun. We're going to continue to read the series over the coming months. We're already on into the second book, and she'll join me for each of those reviews in the future. And then I read Warbreaker by Brandon Sanderson, the King. He's my favorite modern day author, favorite author of all time. I love the guy. I love his fantasies. I don't know if I love his fantasies. I love his fantasy books. But he is the king, and he's created this fictitious fantasy universe known as the Cosmere that a lot of his books reside in. And I've said it many times before, if you don't know that, it's not a big deal. You can read his books without that getting in the way. But if you're an uber fan, then it's really cool to find all of these hidden threads that are linking one series to another series, one character to another character. Out of all the Cosmere books, there are only two that I hadn't read. Elantris was one of them, which I've tried to read, and Warbreaker, which I've never tried to read. It's never even come across my path. I've talked about Sanderson so many times, and Warbreaker is never a part of the conversation. And that is a sin. Warbreaker was so good, and it's so Sanderson. He wrote this, I believe, in the midst of writing the Mistborn trilogy, which is my favorite Sanderson. It was, I believe, between his second and third publication of that series that he wrote Warbreaker, and he did it in a very creative way, where he posted chapter by chapter online, where fans could read along and could comment. And anyways, it was a really cool experience to read it and read through his annotations as I read chapter by chapter. I too did a review of this one, again in the annotations. You can watch that review if you haven't yet, but it's a story of two sisters that are thrust into a foreign country, and they never are together really, but they are meeting with mercenaries and gods and priests and various people who want different results in this country. The sisters are trying to stop a brooding war, and other devious forces are maybe trying to instigate the brooding war. As typical Sanderson, there is a robust magic system here. The characters are so good, so good. I loved every single one of them, especially Nightblood, a talking, sassy sword. And if that doesn't sound good enough for you, then just know this is Sanderson, and it's a standalone novel now. He's going to continue the series at some point in the future, but even as a standalone novel, it's very, very good, and it hit the mark for me. Let me throw a quick book in here that is different than the rest. It's called The Power of Moments. It's by Chip and Dan Heath, and it is a kind of a leadership, nonfiction, business type book that encourages us and teaches us, the readers, how to capitalize and look out for moments in the lives of people you lead and love, and how to empower, embolden, and make those moments memorable. It is well written, artfully paced, and incredibly inspiring. If you like those kinds of books that make you a better you and help you to lead and love better, then I would strongly suggest you pick up and find a copy of The Power of Moments. Very quick read and very, very good. Back to what you came here for. Childhood's End is a 1953 classic traditional sci-fi novel at its best, and it is classic traditional, and it feels that way, but in all the right ways. It actually reminded me a lot of The War of the Worlds, that classic sci-fi story that I believe preceded this 1953 sci-fi novel, but this is all about an alien invasion. Clark had seen the barrage balloons over London during World War II and thought how alien that appeared and how ominous that felt and looked. And so he created a novel based around this, where these alien ships came and rested over major cities and just hovered there. They stayed there. They didn't really contact with humans. And and they wait 50 years to even contact so that humanity can get used to what is there in the sky, and it just continues from there. You've got a few different POVs here over the course of many, many years as these aliens have somewhat of a peaceful invasion of humanity. And it's just, there are some cool things that I've never seen done in a sci-fi novel before with the aliens and how different they are from our stereotypical aliens. And then what their cause and reason and purpose for being here and what they actually do about it and how humanity responds. It's a really cool book that is a really fun and delightful read, but then it has some layers of depth there of like what it says about humanity and what it says about you and what it says about me. Annihilation is the first book in the Southern Reach trilogy that came out in 2014 by Jeff Vandermeer. One of the cool things about this that I found in retrospect is that all three of these books came out within an 8-month period, one after the other in 2014, kind of like a Netflix series where they just shoot them out really quickly so that you can kind of builds the suspense or builds the anticipation, builds the excitement. I wasn't there in 2014 reading these books, but I know that it worked for many people, and looking back on it, I think that's a pretty cool and novel idea. But the story just didn't work for me. It's a story that readers get through and they're like, I have no clue what happened, but it was so good. I had no clue what happened, and that's a problem for me. It's not the more unknown, the more scary or mysterious it is. No, it's like, at least tell me something. We don't get the names of any characters, which is fine. That could be aesthetic, right? But we don't know what the problem is. We don't know what the solution is. We don't know when it started. We don't know how it started. We don't know how it's going to be solved. We don't know any of these things. And I know, again, this is the first part in a trilogy, so it's setting things up, and it all came out the same year. But I don't want to read anymore. I don't want to read anymore. I don't care about these characters. I don't care about this environment. I forgot to even tell you what it's about. It's there is a place in America, don't even know where it is, called Area X that has been polluted, or something bad has happened there. And these various teams of scientists and biologists and different people are going in one group after another to try to survey the area and figure out what's going wrong. So we follow one group that goes in, and of course things go wrong, and we find out a little bit about Area X and a little bit about some of the former groups that have been there, but we find out so very little. It's also a very short read. I think it's like 150 pages or something like that, which, again, maybe that's fine serializing these things in 1, 2, 3 in 1 year, but maybe you just make it one book and give us more. I don't know. It didn't work for me. Annotation if you want to see the full review. And then we've got House of Earth and Blood. It came out maybe 3 months ago. It is by Sarah J. Maas, who wrote the Throne of Glass series. She wrote some other things like, what is it called? Glass of Cord and Roses. It's definitely not what it's called. A Court of Thorns and Roses that I haven't read. I started loving her Throne of Glass series, and then it turned into this raunchy, vampire-esque blood snarl thing that doesn't work for me. It started Assassiny, and it ended with that, so I stopped reading. She came out with this new IP, this new book called House of Earth and Blood, the first in the Crescent City series, and as of recording this video, I'm not yet done, but by the end of this month, I plan to have finished it. I'm about 3/4 of the way through, and man, I don't know yet. It hasn't latched onto me. Here's what I will say. I am invested in the characters, and I do think the story is intriguing. However, the world building isn't the best for me, and it has turned into a murder mystery novel, and that's not what I came here for. And for me, it's more of a deterrent. It's more of a wall to get through when all your characters are different breeds of angels and demons. They're all veneer. I don't know if she made that up, but angels, demons, mer people, fae, all sorts of different creatures. And so I'm not only having to keep up with the names of this wide cast of characters, but I'm having to keep up with what they are. And then it's just this, like, Maas is really wanting us to want these two people to smash, and I don't care. and she keeps building the tension and nothing, building the tension and nothing. And it's graphic. This is not a child's book. This is not a young adult's book. This is an adult book, probably too adult for me, but I'm doing it and finishing it. There will be a review soon, and at that point in time, I'll put the annotations here. Those were the books that I read for the month of May. I don't intend for the month of June to have that many books. I'm about to make my TBR for June, and that will be released within the next couple of days. And I'm not including 8+ books on there. But you know what? We'll see what happens. Have you read any of the books that I've listed and mentioned here? If so, let me know your quick thoughts down below in the comments. Would love to dialogue with you about that. And if there's any books that you think that I should read in the future months based off of this list that I liked and didn't like, please leave those in the comments as well. As always, thank you for watching and liking this video. If you haven't yet, click subscribe so that you can join the Dragon Army, and we'll see you in the next video.